Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This is I for Identity, and thank you for your presence here. And we have really distinguished speakers. So I'll sort of put a little clip to my adulation and start right away. We are already 25 years into this century. So we are 25. And really the question here is to look at two sides of the coin. What have we achieved and how have we come to this? So I'm going to really kickstart right away with Mujib. And we have about 35 minutes sharing time with Ijeoma and Mujib's, both their books and what their arguments are in it, in a critical thinking way. So Mujib, what is it that you want us to hear about your book?
How long? It's 5 minutes.
Can you just speak into the mic?
Yeah.
Time. Yeah, we're here with the counter.
All right. Good afternoon to everybody. Thanks for coming. As you all know that what we're basically going to talk about today in the name of identity is about Indian Muslims. The book is called The Shikwa-e-Hind, The Political Future of Indian Muslims, which is published, not forthcoming, as it was mistakenly mentioned here. The book is has been published for past couple of months. Those who are following Indian politics, the subject of Indian Muslims has been a part of conversation and a part of deep concern, not just nationally but globally in our country and elsewhere. So this book basically addresses those concerns. This book is primarily focused on what has happened to Muslim identity in the context of what is widely claimed and recognized rise of Hindu nationalism in India today. Muslim identity, as you all know, is not just an identity the way, say, Indian diaspora is back in the United States or in England. It is what I describe in my book, a historically dense identity. It has long history and it has many layers. As a result of which, there are all kinds of perceptions about Indian Muslims. When you say you are an Indian Muslim, there is somebody who is going to remember Aurangzeb, there is somebody who is going to remember Babbar, there is somebody who is going to remember Shah Rukh Khan, and there is somebody who will remember, the troublemaker and all of that about of it. So how to reconcile with that, with the constitutional rights that India had offered to this community in 1947, despite partition? As you all know, the Muslim population in India today is roughly around 200 plus million, which is more than the population of Germany and France put together. And if India would not have been divided, then the Muslim population in this continent, in undivided India, would have been roughly close to 700 million, which is Pakistan's population plus Bangladesh plus diaspora. So you could imagine what kind of politics that could have emerged or would have happened in this particular continent. I leave that to imaginations.
And thank you for that, because we're going to come back to other critical issues about secularization and de-Islamization. But I'm going to turn to you, Ijeoma. And I'm actually quoting from your previous moderator's questions. Could you talk to us about these different identities, about being Palestinian or Black Palestinian, and the different gender issues that I think you are presenting in your book?
Yeah, so I have, what I've been writing about is race and gender in America for about a decade, and writing about collective liberation and what we need to do to actually get free. So I'm an abolitionist by nature, which means that I do not believe in imprisonment, incarceration, all of these things built after chattel slavery in the United States. I believe in liberation for all. And I believe that no person has the right to determine that other people don't deserve to be in society, don't deserve to be free, don't deserve bodily autonomy. And so in the United States, which is, of course, a global imperial power, That means that my work comes into a lot of intersections. So the foundation of my work is Black liberation, as a Black American, as a Nigerian American. But because I'm talking about systemic power, that means that my work also intersects with Palestinians and Palestinian Americans, with trans people, disabled people, basically everyone who is harmed by hyper-capitalist imperialist systems. And all of us who have been minoritized by these systems cannot accomplish liberation on our own. And so part of identity is recognizing our unique histories, how these histories make us special, make us uniquely prepared to fight systems of power, but then also recognizing where our histories combine and come together, and where we have shared liberation goals, so that we can come together and enforce and be able to tackle these systemic issues.
Thank you. I think that sort of dovetails quite neatly. Mujib, you, in your introduction to your book, you do quote James Baldwin, and you're bringing in the sort of Black resistance. And I think it is also when we look across the globe and what's happening there, and then reflect on our own situation, was that your intention to make the a kind of a self-reflective picture of what's happening in the country?
Yeah, the central argument in the book is the Muslim question in India is generally debated as part of minority rights, and that is how it is articulated in media, in political discussions, that here is a big minority which is going through bad times and how to deal with it. Where I differ in my analysis is this: I argue that this is not simply the case of minority rights violation. There is more to it. I argue that since almost every aspect of Muslim life is under scrutiny, like the legal structures, legal sites of dargah or masjid, the dress, what they eat, all kinds of stuff. So what is unfolding in India today is what I describe called the de-Islamization process. Muslim no more, Islam no more. The most prominent evidence of Muslim no more comes from the anti-CAA Act that the state enacted. So now the question I'm asking is this: if the things are going wrong with this minority, then how wrong it could be in the future? Which are the other minorities who have confronted such kind of experiences and how they have dealt with it? One of them comes out to be, the worst one is the African Americans. So it is in this context I go back to the writings of African Americans and try to learn from the works of Martin Luther King, James Baldwin, and other Du Bois, that how they have dealt with all these issues of their identity, specifically in their struggle for equality and dignity.
Thank you. Akila, I think, had mentioned that she first read your work and the interview with Rachel Dolezal in The Stranger. And she says she found herself both laughing explosively at your observations of her disingenuousness, body language, and entitlement, but also being menaced by the claims being thrown around in that room by Dolezal. You called that conversation the heart of whiteness. So could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. For anyone who is not aware of who Rachel Dolezal is,
yes,
Rachel Dolezal is a white woman who for many years was pretending to be a Black woman in order to get attention, first and foremost. I think that's at the heart of it, and to gain prominence in a majority white area as a Black civil rights leader. But she was not Black, she was white. And after some very suspicious attacks were made against her that she reported, a reporter started looking into her history and found her white parents and interviewed them, and it came to the news that she was indeed white and not Black, and had a tan and was braiding her hair. And it started this controversy that was really painful for a lot of Black people in America, especially Black women, because then there became a debate of, why can't she be Black if she wants to be Black? And so Black women who are so ignored and abused in American society were still ignored even in the story of who we are. And suddenly this white woman was in every headline when talking about the lives of Black women. I was asked, begged, tricked into interviewing her by an editor who I deeply trust, and I'm so glad he did. It was a very painful day that I spent with her. I spent an entire day with her, talking with her, just trying to understand, because she kept claiming that she had every right to be Black, because she felt Black. Even though she had never experienced anti-Black racism, her ancestors had not experienced anti-Black racism, even though a lot of the work she did harmed actual Black people. And my goal was, honestly, to find out who she was. I was actually very afraid I was going to go and meet her and find something that I couldn't write about, that maybe she had something else happening that wouldn't be ethical for me to write about. But instead, what I found was someone who wanted attention and wanted to make everything about her, who had fallen in love with the mystique of Blackness, of Black womanhood, and felt boring in her life, and decided to steal our identity and use it as her own. And it was very unremarkable at that point, because it is something that I've seen time and time again. People of privilege, taking identities and aspects that they want, and the part of it that they find that they like the best, and leaving the rest behind. And that's what I found at the end of the day, was just more privilege and more abuse of that privilege. And I wrote about it, and it was earlier in my writing career, and it was probably the most read thing I've ever written. The whole website broke when it launched, and it shifted the dialogue about her, which was good.
Thank you for really clarifying that, because that really brings us to this I in the identity. We talk about humanity, the individual perspective, but here we're talking about very specific identities where somebody is taking on a mystique. And now we come into even like a Muslim identity. So I think you were going to also share with us, when did the Islamization come in? If you could give us a little background to that, only because your book is also talking about de-Islamization in the current era.
Well, Islamization started ever since the Islam came to India. So you go back to thousands of years about it. The question is this: when this country became independent from British colony, we had a constitution which essentially is about equality of citizens of all religions. Now that particular equality was not adequately practiced. There were always concerns about Muslim suffering or Muslim backwardness, and there was violence and all that stuff about it. But that was within the framework of minority rights violation. So when we had Sachar committee report, that was essentially a document that essentially raised the concerns about minority rights violations. So here is a minority which is suffering from backwardness, is not able to do well, and all of that about it. The advantage of having the minority rights framework is that the state has an obligation to address the concerns and the issues of that particular minority. What we are coming across today is an ideological movement, and India is going through what I call it an ideological power struggle, in which Hindu supremacists, in the name of Hindu nationalism, are trying to deny this very, very prominent minority community from equal rights. So there is this perception that is coming out that increasingly there are two laws, one for Muslims and the other for the rest of Indians about it. So this whole thing is unfolding as part of what I call the de-Islamization process.
Did you want to read a passage from either that or a particular subject you wanted to illustrate or clarify?
No, passage would be kind of inadequate. If you want, I can read it, but one of the things that I argue is this, using Hannah Arendt's framework called right to have rights. Whenever there is this discussion that's going on that, there are this Babur who did this, Aurangzeb did this, Muslims did this, and all of that stuff about it, then the argument is, well, they're so bad, they've done so many bad things, so they should not, why should we bother about them? Hannah Arendt works, this is the kind of campaign that took place against Jewish community in the Nazi Germany. So Hannah Arendt argues that every community has got right. There is an individual or a section might do something wrong. That does not mean that the entire community should be punished. So there is this moral argument against collective punishment. So I use that particular framework in the analysis of this called right to have rights. The Muslims have got rights. Every Muslim citizen should be treated equally. So that's basically that particular chapter that I have. I can read that part of it. Indian Muslims are currently living under pervasive fear in an India that is increasingly embracing Hindu majoritarian politics, finding themselves as targets of lynching, bulldozer justice, frequent riots, for trivial or often for no reason, and subject to random violence. In the new majoritarian state, they have started asking if they have any rights at all as citizens in India. The Indian state's decision to approve the pardon of 11 perpetrators against gang rape victim Bilkis Bano during the 2002 Gujarat riots on 15th August 2022 and facilitate their release is one of the prominent examples that shows that the arc of justice has stopped bending towards fairness for Indian Muslims. India's Supreme Court overturned this decision of the government on 8 January 2024. But the intent of the government is what is central to our analysis. Despite public outcry that the Indian state remained firm on its decision for close to an year and a half speaks volumes of its intent. In this broad scenario, Muslim citizens are experiencing substantial erosion of rights, and their right to have rights is constantly challenged. The phrase right to have rights was formulated by German philosopher Hannah Arendt, which needs to be unpacked in order to make sense of what is unfolding in India today. In Origins of Totalitarianism, Arendt writes, we become aware of the existence of a right to have rights, and that means to live in a framework where one is judged by one's actions and opinions, and a right to belong to some kind of organized community, only when millions of people emerge who had lost and could not regain their rights because of this new global situation, which is in connection with the Nazism.
Thank you for making those comparisons. It's very important to hear that, and through your book and your reading. Thank you for that. And here I'm going to come up with where we are now. Once again, Akhila's sent this message that she says, in a conversation with the comic Trevor Noah about 4 years ago, you said that in America, people are very afraid to have an honest conversation about race. And you went on to say that you had hoped that in 2020 that we were further along, but we're not. And that's the side of the coin I was saying, how did we get here? So where are we now in 2025? I'm not mentioning names. I think we all know the big name. And what kind of work, really, and this is addressed to both of you in turn, what kind of work is needed to have that honest conversation about race in America now? And what are the answers that emerge to these questions from your grassroots and organizing work, Ijeoma?
I think that first and foremost, people have to realize they can survive finding out they're wrong. Like, I think that fundamental to people's fear in talking about racism or oppression in any sense is the idea that you're going to find that you have caused harm. And that means you're a bad person. And I think we have to let go of that. I mean, when we think about in the movies, when you watch movies about American racism, you always know the racist because they say something horrible, right? Or they're violent, right? Or they're burning a cross, or they're doing these awful, really drastic things. Everyday racism doesn't look like that. Everyday racism looks like you're walking down the street and a black man walks towards you and you grab your purse tighter. Everyday racism looks like you're trying to hire someone for a job and you don't know how to pronounce their name, so you skip it and you move on to a name you're more comfortable with, right? That everyday racism feels like assuming that someone, because of the color of their skin, does not speak the language that you speak or isn't going to be able to communicate with you intelligently. Right? Everyday racism doesn't look like someone waking up and saying, how do I hurt a person of color today? But it is portrayed that way, and I think that is on purpose, so that we don't investigate how these everyday racisms play into systems. So me deciding not to hire someone not to call someone for an interview because I don't understand their name, that is not just me personally deciding not to. That is why Black people in America are 4 times less likely to be called for a job interview across the entire country, right? So that becomes a systemic issue. That becomes something that you can quantify across an entire country, across an entire group. And so recognizing that those small things play a part into a bigger issue, you have to be able to learn it so you can do better. So you are responsible for the harm you cause, but it doesn't make you a horrible person. It means you're a person who's been conditioned by society to do harm. And the only way we do differently and can impact systems is by being willing to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I probably messed up. And all of us have. All of us have privilege that contributes to harm of others. I am a light-skinned Black woman who is cisgender, able-bodied. That means I have probably practiced ableism that has harmed others. It means that often I'm not aware of how my lighter skin tone is often used against people with darker skin tone. The fact that I'm cisgender is often privileged and prioritized above transgender people. When I'm not aware of that and I play into it, I hurt people. And if I think I can't survive learning about that hurt, I will never do better. And I will never be able to engage these systems that are privileging me in order to create change. And so where we're at right now, politically, is we're at a place where our state is trying to make it illegal for people to learn this. So our colleges in the US, our schools, our elementary schools, they're passing laws saying that you can't teach history that will make white people feel bad. You can't teach anything that will make white people feel uncomfortable. And when you think about how pessimistic that is, right? Think about how pessimistic it is. I believe that everyone can learn and grow. I don't believe that anyone's beyond that, but they're literally trying to legislate against it. So where we need to go is I need people to have faith in themselves and feel that they are powerful and stronger than systems and that they can learn and grow and come together and actually tackle these systems together. And that means you have to start practicing it in your everyday life. So that means you need to be looking at how you relate to your family, your community, your coworkers, and say, where am I perpetrating harm? Can I face it? Can I do better? And can I address this now on a larger level?
Thank you. And there was a kind of a reference to this in Greenblatt's discussion on Shakespeare and the second chance, you know, how we really have to address what this pain, this hurt, this bitterness, this brutality is. Otherwise, we're never going to go forward. And I'm sure with all the work that you do and the organization, there are different kind of implementations you put forward. Mujib, you had also talked about if we don't address this right to rights, you see quite, it's not pessimistic, it's a realistic and dark kind of picture ahead. And all this has consequences. So could you share that with us?
Well, you know, whenever discussions on India starts, generally we assume that it all begins from 15th August 1947. The fact remains that we are a civilization and we have a long, long history behind it. And it's very important to pay attention to it, that what is unfolding in today's India has connection with what has happened in the past. And it's very important to reconcile that with the future of our country, the future of our civilization. So it's in that context, one would like to ask that what is the most important issue that this civilization has not been able to address, and it remains a challenge for this civilization to stand as an equal with other important civilizations in the world. In my view, that is the issue of equality. Whether it is a question of equality, inequality between castes, inequality between religion, or the issue of equality between gender, they are the issues that are very central to this particular story of our civilization. And in the Hindu-Muslim question is part of that particular conversation. So today, when we are living at a time when we have a person of Indian origin who has served as the Prime Minister of Britain, We have a person of Indian origin who tried for high political office in America, in Canada. But here is a community who has lived for hundreds of years. There is a political party that does not fill them, deny them from running for office in the parliament or in assembly. And there is not a single Muslim in the cabinet of India today. So representation is deliberately denied. Now the question is this: why representation matters? There are always men who tell you that my mother is a woman, my sister is a woman, my wife is a woman, so therefore I know the women's problem. Does it mean the women should not represent themselves? We all know that women must represent themselves, so also Dalits. So the same argument, Muslims must represent themselves. To deny a community a representation means what is the politics that is evolving here? There is a famous maxim from American Revolution: no taxation, no representation. What does it mean? It's basically a sophisticated attempt to colonize a community. That you're okay, you live here, but you don't come and stand as an equal and share power with us. And that's exactly what is unfolding in India today about it. So in a way, Muslim community is being colonized. In fact, vast number of Muslims are not aware of it. Vast number of secularists are not aware of it. The majoritarian politics is today saying that it's the community's fault. Yesterday, one of the most prominent speaker in this event, 2 days ago, asked me when I presented him the book, he said, explain to me that from 1947, from 1959, there were no riots. What did Muslims do to strengthen secular India? This is Javed Akhtar asking me this question. So there is an attempt always to make Muslims realize that there is something wrong with you. And you are responsible for the fate that you're facing today. And I come across a similar question. Another person asked me that 100 years ago you were a Muslim or you were a Hindu? I said, I had no idea. Now why didn't you become a Hindu? I said, well, I would become a Hindu, but I would prefer to be a Brahmin. Would you make me a Brahmin? So he said, why do you want to be a Brahmin? I said, well, I'll go and become a chief Mahanta of Ajodhya, and everybody will come and touch my feet and I'll bless them, and I'd like to live like that. So, it's very strange that accepting Muslims as equal citizens in this country has become such a matter of concern among people who are otherwise very decent. And that erosion of consciousness and awareness and acceptability is something which is a major problem with our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for such a really. It's about really facing pain of what we're living in, and it's not in a sense of victimization. I think it's about strength and addressing ourselves as individuals, even as we are sitting on this panel, you're sitting in this audience, to really, exercise our discriminative faculty about what's happening around us and how we are easily led into assumptions about what things are. So this is a good time now, and we'll take a few questions. I already see arms leaping up, which is great. I'm sure there are mics to hand. So could I start with the person at the back there with the cap on, and then I'll come to you all. Yeah.
Hi. My question is to Professor Mujibur. You talked about the principles of equality that the Indian Constitution promises and how they are not held true in practice. But if you could also comment upon how to understand the inherent complications enshrined within the Indian Constitution with respect to the Muslim identity, be it the Prevention of Animal Slaughter Act, in the directive principles, or the Hindu undivided family law for the tax exemptions, or the essence of this distinguishing of quote unquote the native and the foreign religion. So yeah, that's the question. Thank you.
That's 3 on 3 counts. Yeah.
Shall I answer now?
Yes.
There is a whole debate that goes on about Indian Constitution. I've quoted some of them in the introduction and also in the second chapter, that Indian Constitution is inherently majoritarian, right? So all these issues have been cited as examples of majoritarianism. In fact, I have a table in the book which shows that a large majority of members of Constituent Assembly were from the upper caste Indians, and therefore it has acquired that kind of shapes. So that's a debate that's been going on. Even if you set that aside, what we are coming across today in India is a far more significant erosion of equality. Like the Constitution doesn't say that you should not have a member of cabinet in your government just because the person happens to be a Muslim, or don't field Muslim these things. That's a long history over there. So I don't disagree. The beauty of Indian Constitution is, let me say one thing in defense of it, that this is a flexible constitution open to amendment. So instead of amending those whatever structures or issues concerning inequality, what we are coming across is a widespread practice of inequality. So that's a major shift that has taken place. I'm not saying that there are no elements of inequality within. Maybe there are more than what you have mentioned, but there is a provision that this constitution can be amended, and there are several amendments have taken place.
Yeah. Thank you. We have one question here, and I'll take yours and
Hello.
row.
Yes, hi, good evening. My question is to Rahman sir. So my question is that, do we need affirmative action or something like reservation for current situations for the Muslim society, as they are also socio-economically backward? So your opinion.
Well, the point that I'm interested in highlighting in my book, I have a whole chapter called The Unending Nature of Muslim Backwardness. The idea that Muslims ruled for hundreds of years, several hundreds of years, does not mean every Muslim was an Akbar or enjoying a great life. There were also Muslims who were poor when the Muslim rule was there, right? Muslims have been historically a multi-class society. So since last 50, 60 years, there has been an attempt by comparing Muslims with the Dalits. They have been told that they're the new Dalits. And since Dalits have profited out of affirmative action policy, so there are a lot of secularists who have argued that Muslims should also be given affirmative action policy. But that is the argument that is given. But the problem that I'm trying to highlight is more political. You see, backwardness is a problem. Just because that you are Ajim Premji, that does not mean, or somebody who is well off, that doesn't mean you're not going to be lynched because you are eating something that, hurts the sentiment of some people about it. So the politics in that sense has changed and shifted. Just because that you are well off, but that does not mean that's going to save you from bulldozer justice, and we have come across about it. So affirmative action policy is not going to solve bulldozer justice problem or lynching problem or the riots that are coming across and all of that part of it. So
another question from the lady just in the back row. Yeah, thank you. We have to have some women's voices as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking me. Yeah. So my question to you, beautiful lady, first of all. So as you shared some great insights about racism and how we can survive if you're having racism and that stuff. So as being the 14 years old, so specifically for the people who are in their teens and in the early 20s, so what would be that thing, or what would be that advice or the lesson that we can adapt so that our society could be changed, and even the world and country? And
I love that question. Thank you for that. A lot of things that I like to tell when I'm talking with young people, if you want to be an engineer when you grow up, right, you would never think to never take a math class, right? You would have to take math classes. You would have to practice it, build your skills. The same is for justice, right? If you want to live in a more just world and you want to be a part of it, you have to start practicing it. So when I talk about systems and systemic oppression, a lot of times people think I'm talking about who is elected to government, right? But your friend group is also a system. Your classroom is also a system. If you go to worship, that is also a system. Your family is a system. And you need to start looking at what is your influence in that system. And so I've seen students come together and look at their classroom and look at what they're learning in the classroom and say, what influence do I have about what we're studying, or how we're treating each other, or how we are moving through this space that we're in? If you do that and you can normalize that with your peers, and your peers know that everyone is safe with you, that you're having these important conversations, that you're looking to make sure that everyone is included, that everyone is heard, and that you are challenging those people in your small sphere that want to make sure that some people don't have access to things or aren't treated equally, then you grew up expecting it, and you grow up knowing how to do it, and your peers do as well. You don't just magically turn 18 and know how to change the world. You start changing the world that you're in. So I always tell students, right now you are a chapter in somebody else's book, right? You have your own story, but you are an important chapter in someone else's story. What character do you want to be? Do you want to be why somebody helped find their way in the world? Do you want to be why somebody felt safer in the space that they're in and felt empowered? Is that the character you want to be in the lives of your peers? And you can be that right now. And it's one of the most important things you can be, because at your age, no one ever forgets being your age. No one ever forgets how they felt when they were your age. No one ever forgets finding their place in the world at your age. You're not only finding your place, but you're helping all of your peers find their place as well. You will probably never be as powerful as you are right now.
I'm doing this in twos, 2 male voices, 2 female voices, so please bear with me, trying to be equal.
Good evening. I have a question for Mujib, sir. Sir, how do you look at political movements of resistance on the street? Do you see a political future for them, or do you see them as diffuse in nature?
Well, there is hardly a serious political movement to fight for secular politics, right? And I can, we have the best example comes from Shahin Bagh movement about it. But Shahin Bagh movement, if you compare Shahin Bagh with the farmers movement, you'll come across there's a significant difference. Shahin Bagh failed to prevent or stop the government from passing the Citizenship Act. Citizenship Act in any case was passed, whereas farmers movement succeeded. Since Shahin Bagh was very close to my workplace, so I used to go there every day. If you look at, there's a significant quality difference and quantity difference in terms of resources, investment, and all of that about it. So the sad part is this political movement on its own could only do so much about it. But then the Indian state has become quite anti-movement in recent years about it. Activists and all been thrown into jail, so they're threatened. Lot of funding for various civil society organizations from foreign funding and all of this have stopped and all of that about it. Many of them often played a very important role. For instance, one of the significant movement that took place called Anna movement against corruption, and which led to a political party. But a lot of these activists had, had association with various organizations abroad and were over the years, not in that particular point of time. So there is a significant onslaught and attempt to destroy those connections and network. So voice has been very, very diminished. Not just movements, but even in media, it's very difficult to write pieces concerning Muslims, for instance. So massive deplatforming or denying and all of that about that you come across. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. You had a question, yes. Mm-hmm.
Sir, is it not the ripening time for the common law in our country?
Yeah, there is always a time for common law. What you're talking about is essentially uniform civil code. Is that what you're trying to allude to, right? Now the question is this, we have a society where majority religion is founded on caste, and if we go by Ambedkar's interpretation of caste, caste is essentially about inequality, right? Can it be possible to build a society where caste exists and we still have equal law? Right? We can't have that. So now the reform movement within Hindu society has almost vanished. Right? Now we have a very famous political slogan that has come up recently and echoed in a big way during Maharashtra elections called Batoge to Katoge. Right? What does it mean if you think deeply? It's an appeal for fraternity. Right? But does it say Thakurs and Dalits are equal? No. It does not address that question. It avoids that. Now secularists do not have an answer to this because they have not come out with a catchy slogan which could take this on, right? But so here is an attempt to build fraternity without addressing the issue of equality. But can there be fraternity, substantive fraternity, without equality, right? So uniform civil code, so far as I understand, is a good thing mean, I can go on and I've written about it, and in my chapter on women, I've dealt with it. I think fundamentally, Hindu society had to change itself. The caste has to go in order to build a common law or common things about it. And then the question of tribal, right? In Uttarakhand, they have simply said, no, we are not going to touch tribal. Why should tribal be accepted but not Muslims? Right? So we have this whole complicated affair that there is a selective targeting of all of this about it, and that we need to understand that politics.
We have one question. I've got just two questions. We'll also have to make our answers brief. I'm trying to be absolutely dole it out to everybody an opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we are having very wonderful conversations, and Professor, with due respect to your scholarship, at 68 years of age and having seen life very closely in this country, based on my lived experience, I have a lot of confusion about the premises you have built. Just one or two examples.
Just to ask the question.
I'll ask the question.
Yeah,
Then my
because
question will
I'll tell you why. Because
Have you read the book?
No, I haven't read the
Yeah,
book.
please read the book. I'll give you my email address. We can have a conversation on that.
Why I'm saying?
yeah, I'll also give you, I'm just giving you another space because there's book signing also going on, and that's an opportunity.
Question. Now straight to question.
I want the question mark at the end and the tone to go up. Wonderful.
Question. Should we keep calling Muslims as minorities with 20% of population and with lot of other communities like Sikhs, Parsis, Jains, Jews? Do you take pride in calling yourself as a minority? You are a second majority population of this country. I think that will
Well,
give
this
you
is a
sense of
standard.
pride also.
Yeah, I got the point. This I have addressed that particular part in my book also. Majoritarian arguments do not acknowledge minorities of anybody, whether they are 15% or 1%, because majoritarianism founded on this argument. Majoritarianism founded on this argument that idea of minority is divisible. Right? Now the question is this: we have our Prime Minister who had told us that we should have a secular civil code. This is a need of the hour. But we also know that our Prime Minister also happens to be one of the most ideological Prime Ministers of India. Jawaharlal Nehru and Narendra Modi are the two most ideological Prime Ministers of modern India. Nehru wanted to move the country towards the left, and Mr. Modi has tried to move it towards the right. Right? Now the question is, you don't have a secular government, but you wanted a secular civil code. What do you mean by that? You know, the question is, idea of minority is something that has never been placed with comfort with the majoritarianism of Hindu kind or Muslim kind or Christian kind. It's a fact. Because they just don't recognize. They say, we are very nice people. That is why you are here since last 1,000 years. You have this old mosque standing in Kerala. Has anything happened to it? Believe in our nicety, and just we will be nice to you. You don't have to come and become minister with us or governor with us. You stay there. We will be nice to you. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mujib, and thank you for that response. One last question. We are on to zero, and the button is to push us all out to launch
Professor
and
Mujib,
sign books.
particularly, I raised two questions here. One of the question is like that: India is a democratic, secular country. In such a country, creating a situation of the identity politics is, I think, this is a special kind of the demerit in the Indian democracy. Got it. Second question. Number two, is it now becomes a very impartial position here that the outgoing Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, before delivering of the very high verdict in a particular case, he says, I have a pray with the God first, and I explain my agitation to the God himself there, and then ultimately he given me the verdict and I have delivered. Yeah. Number two, a High Court judge is saying here that the majority community, whatever it is doing, is the larger beneficial situation of the Indian democracy there. So in such a situation, is it saying very important that unity and diversity or the secular ethos of our nation is in the danger, or is it a very betterment of the new India?
Okay.
Thank you.
Very quickly, this is again another important ploy that majoritarian politics often uses. That why should we talk about Muslim identity, Christian identity? We are all Indians. Why should we talk about Dalit identity? We are all Indians. It's all right, we are all Indians. Then you look at media, you look at universities, you look at bureaucracy. Why is it people of only 5% or 10% upper caste who dominate and get these jobs? How does that happen about it? So there is an identity politics that is in any case in play. And you see that all over. How many Indians who go abroad, what is the caste background of those Indians? The diaspora. Are they Dalits? Are they Muslims? See? And they all become American citizens and their children clap and loyal to American flags, right? But a Muslim boy, if he claps for a Pakistan team, it becomes a big issue as if India is going to fall apart. But thousands and thousands of Indians have become Americans, and India has become a kind of democracy which basically produces future Americans, and that's not a problem in this country. Right? Has our Prime Minister, who goes to America and addresses this diaspora, ever says, come back to this country, we have liberated from British, and let us build it? No. He says, you come to Delhi, I'll see to it that you don't face transport problem. That's the answer, right? So think deeply. There is identity politics which denies these identities, which is the reason why it is important to have that argument. About judgments and others, we can have longer discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mujib. Thank you, Ijeoma. We've had a wonderful discussion. Books are going to be signed. There's time for you with the signing to ask your questions. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.